Hey everybody, what's going on? This is Danelle of Networkchain. Thank you for tuning in to our weekly video here on YouTube. As you can see, Bitcoin is currently trading at $39,509, up 4.7% over the last 7 days and up nearly 2% over the last 24 hours. It has reached above that $39,000 range. So a lot of people are getting very excited about the news that there's a possibility that an ETF, a spot ETF in the United States, may be approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission within the next several weeks. But if anything, many are speculating that it could happen by January 10th. We'll get into that a little bit more. But as usual, let's go through a quick cryptocurrency market update. We just mentioned Bitcoin has now reached over $39,000. Ethereum is also doing quite well in the last 7 days. It is up over 4.6%, now over $2,100 at $2,170. We see XRP is at 62 cents. It stayed pretty flat over the last 7 days. BNB, despite what has happened with their CEO stepping down over the past week and a half, it has still held fairly steady for the most part. It's only down 1.3% over the past week, currently trading at $230. Solana nearing its all-time high over the past year, currently trading at $65.11, up over 11% over the past week. We have Cardano up over 2%, Dogecoin over 10%, and then we have Tron, Chainlink, Toncoin, Avalanche, Polygon, and Polkadot rounding out the top 15. We usually do the top 10, but we said let's go ahead and go down a little bit further just so you can see some of the other mostly smart contract platforms that are moving up in the ranks as well. So this video is all about Bitcoin. We keep hearing about this spot Bitcoin ETF that is going to be approved by the SEC. And because of that speculation, we're seeing that people are trying to front run the news that it will be approved by buying into Bitcoin. You can see here just over the last 24 hours, it was ranging around 38,000, 38,700. And then it took a jump up and now it is in that $39,000 range. So we'll see how long it stays here. There's a possibility it can come back down a little bit. As you can see over the last 7 days, we're seeing that Bitcoin is taking incremental steps up, and it went from 37 then to around 38, and now it's upwards of 39,000. Many people believe that there's a possibility that Bitcoin could get to the $40,000 to $45,000 range leading up to January of 2024. This could be a very bullish month. Still remains to be seen. You always have to make sure that you check the charts as well as have an understanding of the market demand. Look at the fear and greed index. So there's a lot of different resources and a lot of things that you want to consider, especially if you're considering getting into Bitcoin at this price, because we have had a nice run up, as you can see, over the last month. Bitcoin is up over 14%, and over the past year, Bitcoin has more than doubled, currently trading at over 131% over the past year. So if there's a possibility that Bitcoin could get to 50 and nearing all-time highs, which was around $69,000, there's going to be a lot of ebbs and flows in between here and that point. So if you do decide to trade and invest into Bitcoin, just make sure you have an understanding of the market and learn as much as you can before you invest, because it is still very volatile. Just as easily as Bitcoin is able to go up $2, $3, $4, $5, $10,000, it is just as easy for it to go down just as much, if not more. So just make sure you do as much research and have a better understanding of this market before you decide to trade and invest. So as we mentioned, we talked about the spot Bitcoin ETF. We've talked about it in a number of videos, and I'm sure if you have been following Bitcoin or have started watching to see and learn more about Bitcoin and this Bitcoin ETF, this has definitely been the news of the last couple of months. And as you can see here, Grayscale, which is the largest institutional holder of Bitcoin. They say that the Bitcoin ETF approval is just a matter of when, not if. Now, we've talked about in some of our previous videos, Grayscale has a Bitcoin trust called GBTC. They tried to convert it to an ETF. The SEC denied it. They were then sued by the SEC, or I should say, excuse me, Grayscale sued the SEC, and it was found that the SEC did not make a decision that made a lot of sense to the judge. They said that their decision making when it came to approving futures ETFs as opposed to allowing Grayscale to convert their Bitcoin trust to an ETF was seemingly arbitrary and capricious. So they won that suit. So now it is still pending whether or not that trust will now be turned into an ETF. They're definitely one of the ones that are first in line, considering that they have been holding that trust and it's available to buy in many IRAs, in retirement funds. So Grayscale has been in talks with the SEC along with several other asset managers with regards to their ETF filings. And as you can see here, they continue to say that it's just a matter of time before a ETF is finally approved. That includes the possibility that the digital asset manager will get approval from the SEC to convert the trust. So here you can read a little bit more. You can go to decrypt.co, decrypt.co, decrypt, and you can read here a little bit more about what Grayscale says about their lawsuit, which I just mentioned, claiming that the commission had been unfair in refusing to accept an application from Grayscale, and then the signs that are now showing that there's a possibility that that ETF will finally be approved. So if we go here to blockworks.co, and they have a list here of the Bitcoin ETFs that are currently running and are also pending. So as we can see here, the Grayscale trust is still pending. They had a final deadline date in 2022. Once that deadline was made and the SEC denied their conversion, that's when Grayscale sued the SEC. We just had a ruling on that earlier this year. So now it is back to pending status. As you can see here, they have over 16.65 billion in assets when it comes to Bitcoin and that Bitcoin trust. And all of these that are showing as running, these are future ETFs. So the SEC did approve these futures ETFs. Many believe that if a futures ETF was approved by the SEC, then it just made sense that a spot ETF would also be approved, because futures actually, in many people's eyes, is a little bit more speculative and actually maybe even a little bit more risky than a spot ETF, because a future is basically a bet on the price of an asset at a future date, when the spot ETF, as we've talked about before, has to do and it follows the Bitcoin price on the spot. So what it is at that particular moment when it's being traded. So we see that there are a number of futures ETFs that are currently running, and then we get down to the list that is currently pending. So the reason why many believe that an ETF approval, a spot ETF approval, could be made before January or in January is because, as we see here, this ARKB, which is the ARK Invest / 21 shares Bitcoin Trust, the last deadline that the SEC has before making a final decision is January 10th, 2024. So when a asset manager or a firm applies for an ETF with the SEC can delay that decision by a number of months and can do that multiple times. So they have a period of time where they can have discussions with these asset managers, and also they have time to make a decision. So it doesn't have to be, a one-time be-all date. So with ARK Invest, there is a final deadline. There does get to a point where they have to make a final decision. And with ARK Invest and 21 shares, SEC has to make the decision by January 10th, 2024. So many believe that if they were to reject that application and then go on to approve other applications after they have rejected ARK, then ARK would likely have a lawsuit on their hands. And so the SEC most likely wouldn't want to have to go through that again, especially given what happened with the Grayscale litigation. So most people are speculating that we will have an approval by the 10th of January. So this is a reason why Bitcoin is starting to run up. So definitely we will keep you posted. This is going to be posted all over the news, especially if that ETF is approved anytime between now and January. You can see some of the other ETFs that are also pending and some of the major asset managers that are involved. When you look at Wisdom Tree, Invesco, Valkyrie, and then, of course, BlackRock, the largest asset manager with nearly $10 trillion of assets under management. They have their iShares Bitcoin Trust that is pending, and they don't have to have a final approval until March of 2024. So if we look at what is happening with Bitcoin and who is accumulating Bitcoin, we're seeing that we have reached an all-time high, and this is just up and to the right when you look at the number of addresses that have over 0.01 BTC. Currently, that is currently around $390 or so worth of Bitcoin. All you need is just a little bit. If you decide to get into the cryptocurrency market and if you decide to get into Bitcoin, it doesn't hurt just to get a little bit and see what happens. If anything, people look at Bitcoin as a hedge against inflation, against any other global black swan event that could happen. It still remains to be seen if that's going to be the case, but it may be a good idea to consider something like cryptocurrency or other assets that could be a hedge against the US dollar or just any other type of fiat currency that is being run by a central bank. But as you can see here, the all-time high has been reached of the Bitcoin wallet addresses that have over 0.01 BTC. Here's another chart that we can look at. We can see also that more wallets are now over 1 million wallets, and that was reached earlier this year, have now over 1 Bitcoin in that particular address. So there are people who have multiple Bitcoin addresses with multiple amounts of Bitcoin in each address. But the great thing about Bitcoin and the great thing about many of these public blockchains is that you can see on the ledger what exactly is going on within the blockchain. So you can see what the balances are and how much people hold in each address. Now, the addresses are anonymous, but we do have those on-chain analytics to be able to understand the demand given the supply that Bitcoin currently has outstanding. And as many of you know, and if you don't know, there's only going to be 21 million Bitcoin ever in circulation. And as you can see, right now, the circulating supply is over 19,500,000 Bitcoin. And so if we look at just an interesting stat here, we look at the Bitcoin rich list, you can see the Bitcoin distribution. And if we look at the top 4 addresses that have over 100,000 Bitcoin in the address upwards to 1 million, there are 4 addresses that have that amount of Bitcoin. Many of us, if you do not know that Satoshi Nakamoto, which was the creator of the Bitcoin blockchain, they have a wallet that has 1 million Bitcoin, and it has not been touched since the wallet was created. And so many people believe that Satoshi Nakamoto, whether it be a man, a woman, or a group, they most likely will not touch or trade Bitcoin ever. Of course, we don't know for sure, but as we know right now, and that address is being watched very, very carefully. So far, that is 1 million Bitcoin that most likely is out of circulation. So we will continue to obviously keep you posted if we hear anything about what happens with that particular Bitcoin address. But as you can see the distribution of Bitcoin currently. It's very interesting to see what these numbers will be, let's say a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. But definitely, it's all about Bitcoin, as I mentioned, especially when it comes to the cryptocurrency market. The altcoin being anything that is not Bitcoin, it usually follows whatever Bitcoin is doing. So once we see Bitcoin start to go on a rise, there's going to be what they call altcoin season, when the altcoins start to make a major run. we can see when it comes to supply and demand that the percent of supply that was last active a year or more, meaning that nothing was done to that Bitcoin, it hasn't been taken out of the wallet, it hasn't been traded or exchanged. There's a number of wallets that have been basically dormant for at least a year, that continues to rise as well, meaning that these people are holding their Bitcoin. They're not selling. As you can imagine, this is going against the Bitcoin price. So we do see that as Bitcoin goes up in price, that goes down because people are looking to sell when it's going to all-time highs. And then many of the more seasoned traders will then get back in as Bitcoin goes back down. At some point, we will have to do a video, and so you can understand a little bit more about the Bitcoin cycle. It usually goes on a 4-year cycle because of the Bitcoin halving. But as you can see here, we still have higher highs when it comes to the amount of Bitcoin addresses that are holding Bitcoin and are not trading or moving their Bitcoin off of their address, off of their wallet. So you can see here we had a low, then we have a higher low here, and then another higher low here when you look at the cycle and look at that in correlation to Bitcoin price. So definitely something to consider. As like I mentioned, it is very important to do as much research as you can if you're considering getting into the Bitcoin market and to cryptocurrency, just generally speaking. Here at Networkchain, we want to relay as much information as possible because we're learning along with you. Please feel free to follow us here at IG at Networkchain. We post here nearly every day, along with our posts on X and then our weekly videos here on YouTube. Please make sure to check us out. You can learn a little bit more about what's going on in the cryptocurrency market every day, not only with crypto, but also with NFTs. So thank you so much for watching. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to being back in touch with all of you very soon. In the meantime, take care. Bye-bye.